David, what are you doing?
I think I'm fighting with the entire internet. These people are absolutely nuts. I posted a video about Bryan Callen and sexual assault, and now I'm being called a clout-chasing quack. One guy said that it says I'm. Everybody's willing to weigh in on the success of this channel, which it's not going to be successful, apparently. There's two Kevins that are absolutely obsessed with me. The amount of time they spend giving me comments, it borderlines on obsession. They want me dead, or they're in love with me. One of the two, I think.
What did you do to piss everyone off?
And they think I said that Bryan Callen is guilty of sexual assault. They think I've condemned him. Well, there's a woman that's, because I'm responding to these people, she thinks that I'm folding like a beach chair because I'm explaining myself to rape apologists. I can't win. Pop Psych, and here's why. It stands for popular psychology, and through YouTube, I will become popular, and I'll be a popular psychologist. I'm David Colarosi. No, it's Dr. David Colarosi. I have a master's degree in marriage and family therapy and a PhD in counseling psychology.
You are such a genius.
On this channel, I try to use events in popular culture to facilitate deeper discussions that relate to psychology. So for example, I used Kanye West's decision to run for president to talk about mood disorders. I used President Trump to talk about narcissism. I used the media to discuss cognitive dissonance, Central Park Karen to discuss behavioral self-control. In the case of Callen's video, he was the launch pad. I made Callen the focus of my last video because he's well known to be a nice guy. And recently, 4 different women came out and said that over the last 20 years, at various times, he had sexually assaulted each of them in different kinds of sexual assault. And I have no idea if that's true, and I want to be really clear in this video, I am not condemning him or saying that he did it or didn't do it. What I think is important about the accusations is that across the board, the women are not saying that he set out to hurt them. They're not saying that he jumped out of the bushes and attacked them. They're saying that he was trying to seduce them. He was trying to be with them, and it went too far. That's important because it's the most common type of rape or sexual assault. Like 80 to 90% of the time when someone is assaulted, it's by a person they know and a person that they're with. But when we think about sexual assault, we think about the guy in the bushes, the guy in the woods, the guy that's hiding in the garage. And that's actually really, really, really rare. What's much more common is a romantic interaction where one party thinks seduction is working and the other party doesn't. And the mentality, the mindset, the psychology of the person that is involved in seduction that goes wrong and may or may not be aware of it is very different than the psychology or mentality of a person that's jumping out of the bushes. And that's what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to encourage people that are listening to my video to seek not just consent, but agreement, right? Don't just be looking to, not hear the word no. Be looking for your partner to agree. You want them actively engaged. That was it. That was my message. That was my intention. And clearly, by looking at the comments, I missed the mark. People felt like I was bagging on Bryan, like I was condemning him, and admittedly, that was due in many parts to the way I had positioned it with the thumbnail, with the sort of general focus on Callen, with my tone, because my tone was somber. I am disappointed that this has happened. I hate the fact that this LA comedy community keeps having people being accused of sexual assault. It sucks as a fan. I don't know what to believe. It's hard. So I was somber, and I recognize now that the way that video was interpreted by people, it landed wrong. So for that, I apologize, and I hope that the tone of this video will be better. Let me just jump in real quick and say that if you want to see the first video, I've linked it above. But I also feel totally misunderstood by my audience. I don't think 90% of the commenters even watched the video. They saw the thumbnail, got pissed, and jumped to conclusions. They hopped on the bandwagon without really making an effort to learn about me, learn about my message. Which makes me think that's probably on a very small scale what Callen is feeling. If Callen is innocent, if the accusations are wrong, can you imagine the distress he's under? What would it be like to have your whole world turned upside down for something you didn't do? For the world to think you're one way and you know you're not. Being misunderstood like that would be devastating. So that's the purpose of this video. I want to talk about the psychological impact of being wrongfully accused. Ahead of putting this together, I did some research to figure out what the kind of prevailing view was around the psychological impact of being wrongfully accused of something. And I also wanted to learn, have mental health professionals identified the sort of best practice for responding to false accusations. And the data is really bad. Most of it is just self-report, kind of qualitative studies where a researcher is going out and interviewing groups of people, some that have been convicted and some that haven't been convicted. But as you can imagine, it's really difficult to control the severity of the crime, and it's really difficult to control each individual's view on the outcome, right? There are people that have been convicted that may continue to say they didn't do the crime, and there are people that haven't been convicted that maybe did do the crime. And so how do you control for that? It's very difficult. But what we do know, and what researchers have sort of agreed on, is that your psychological distress is worse if you don't believe you've been accurately convicted. If you get a punishment that you don't think you deserve, the distress is significantly worse than the distress experienced by someone who goes, yeah, I did the crime. And it seems obvious, but it's important because it proves that the distress is not caused by the punishment. The distress is caused by not being known, not being understood. There is distress in feeling like people don't get who you are. And that psychological phenomena has been studied. Researchers have shown very clearly that when people feel misunderstood, they can experience both depression and anxiety. And that data doesn't come from simple online surveys. It comes from investigators looking at neural scans. Using an fMRI, they can look at the brain and see that the parts of the brain that are typically associated with negative emotion are the same parts of the brain that are activated when someone feels like they're not totally known by the people around them. The big question is why? Why is it so important for people to feel fully understood by others? If I know who I am, does it really matter if the person over there gets me? And the answer is, yeah, it really matters. We are very social creatures, and we understand ourselves through others, through comparison. I only know if I'm smart or not smart by comparing my intellect with that of those around me. I only know if I'm funny by seeing if other people are laughing. Are they laughing at me more than they laugh at other people? Right? It's all about that comparison. And if there's not alignment between how I am viewing myself and how others are viewing me, it throws into question my own ability to self-appraise. All of a sudden, I don't really know who I am. So keep that in the back of your mind, and then think about the accusations that were leveled against Bryan Callen. Bryan sees himself, I think, as a very good person, a person that cares about others, a person that cares about women, a person that advocates for women's rights. He also sees himself as a very strong father to a boy and a girl. As a comedian, he likes to be sophisticated. He gets criticized for constantly being too didactic, constantly trying to teach, right? He likes that position. He likes to further the conversation. If the accusations are false and the world believes them, it undermines Bryan's own ability to self-evaluate. He'll struggle to see himself as a strong father because the world will be saying, you can't raise a woman. He'll question his ability to make others laugh because people will say, you're not funny anymore. He'll no longer be able to see himself as a teacher. He'll no longer see himself as sophisticated because no one will want to listen to what he has to say. And that is absolutely devastating. So with all that said, what's the best way to move forward? How should society handle this so that it protects both the victims or survivors and the wrongfully accused? And I really don't have a good answer to that. Everything I've read online, grossly favors one party or the other. And it doesn't seem like there's a good middle ground. The most kind of consistent argument I have seen that I think is a mistake is the idea that we should prevent the media from publishing a potential perpetrator's name, right? The argument is we shouldn't be talking about Callen unless we know Callen did it. I think it's a flawed argument just because it prevents the media from triggering or encouraging other women to come forward. And a good example is the Weinstein case. I think he had 2 cases of sexual assault or sexual harassment originally. And then over the course of time, 90 plus women came forward and said, yeah, he harassed me as well. right? So by getting the ball rolling, more and more people were willing to come forward. The same thing is true with the case of Larry Nassar, the guy with the U.S. gymnastics team, right? Originally it was one person, and then, over the years, more and more people came forward as the case rolled on. So you don't want to stop that process, but you also don't want to drag someone's name through the mud. And I just don't know what the right answer is. So I'm sure you have ideas. Please feel free to list them in the comments. I'd be curious to see what you think. I do have some thoughts for Callen. If I were Callen and innocent, I would be very intentional about increasing my social exposure. I think the natural response people have in times like this, the natural response is to kind of go into hiding, button down the hatches, and wait for things to blow over. In Callen's case, he's very fortunate to have a very strong online community that supports him. I can attest to you, people are very supportive. He also has a family system and a lot of friends in that LA comedy network that really care about him and believe in him. The more he can engage with that group, the more he can remind himself that his identity is still intact. Callen needs to know that he can still be a strong father, he can still be a funny comedian, and he can still add to kind of the societal conversation. The more he can remind himself that that's all true, the better off he'll be. And eventually, this will blow over, the truth will come out, and his name will be cleared. That's how I'd approach it. Anyway, thank you all for listening. Please, if you would, leave your comments below. Thanks. Oh, like and subscribe.